Hi, this is Detective 47, the one and only sound detective, and today we're going to talk about a project I'm working on to celebrate the 27th anniversary of a classic album that had a profound impact on me just throughout my life. It's Dr. Dre's The Chronic. This album came out on December 15th, 1992. Dre was 27 when he put the album out, and it's 27 years old right now. The number 27 has a significant place in rock and roll history, so I thought it'd be a good time to pay homage to a classic album like this. What I'm putting out is something I'm calling The Sonics, which is a tribute to The Chronic, and it's just going to be an instrumental album that focuses on just Dre-inspired sounds that kind of took off a little bit and veered in a Detective 47 way too, but at all times paying homage to the Doctor, So what we're going to talk about is the sonics that he used, what separated it, some of the key components, some of the musicians that were involved. We're going to shine a spotlight on some of the guys behind the scenes you may have not heard of, such as you had a lot of great musicians. You had Colin Wolfe, who played a big part in it with Dre, played a lot of the bass lines. The Moog did some of the recording. You had Chris Claremont, some of the MCs that were involved. DOC had a huge part with the writing. A lot of people didn't know about that. We'll talk a little bit about the cultural impact, how it sonically kind of defined an era, and how that sound still is a standard to match today, and honestly probably always will be. The other thing that makes the album sound fat is Dre was using some very classic drum machines at that time. You hear the 808 on certain records, you hear the MPC 60, you hear the SP1200, I believe. These are like very crunchy, fat-sounding drum machines. There was classic loops taken. They're like one of the songs, I think it's Lyrical Gangster. Colin Wolfe brought in a sample from one of my favorite Led Zeppelin records, When the Levee Breaks, which probably one of the most classic-sounding drum grooves in rock history. Not just a drum groove because it's John Bonham playing, but it's also the sonics that were captured on that. That's got a whole rock history and legendary tale to itself. Those drums were recorded in a big mansion that was Aleister Crowley's old house that Jimmy Page purchased, and those drums sound amazing on their own, but Dre sampled them and put it in Lyrical Gangster, which I recommend anybody put that track on and listen to it, and you'll just hear the snare drum and the way they took that drum break. It just sounds huge. And I challenge anybody to take When the Levee Breaks, the drum sample, and put it in and try to get it to slam as hard as Dre gets that snare slamming on Lyrical Gangster, and send it over to me if you do, but good luck. As an adult and listening to it in different sound systems and realizing these mixes were just incredible. The live instrumentation, the way everything's balanced, the fact that the bass knocks not only in a studio system such as this, but in earbuds and any type of headset. It's like it's a sonic masterpiece. That's why I'm calling the project I'm working on The Sonics. It's just a tribute to Dre in the best way that I can do in my Detective 47 way. For me personally, I took on some of the format what Dre used, is bringing different musicians in. For myself, I brought in a different cat to program drums named Ethan James. I brought on a trumpet player. I'm handling most of the bass duties, live bass, live guitar. To get the sonics of The Chronic, I wanted to get a 70s sounding guitar feel, because Dre took a lot of his samples and vibe, I feel like, from the Parliament Funkadelic sound, especially, Mothership. You had a lot of 70s albums that he took a vibe from. So I used a Stratocaster through an old Fender Quad Reverb to kind of get just that 70s sound. So a fun fact about the Chronic album, a lot of people don't know this, but what Dre would do, you know, I know Snoop and Daz and everybody would get in the studio, and one of the things they would do for inspiration is they looked to this old Appalachian mountain music that would inspire them before they would, you know, write their gangster shit pretty much. You know, licks kind of like... Alright, let's get real. Most of the guitar sounds for the Chronic and what Dre's using is old 70s, 60s kind of soul samples, very soulful guitars. What I choose to recreate those kind of sounds with is I use my Frankenstein Strat into an old Fender Quad Reverb, which is kind of like a Fender Twin. Use a little bit of the spring reverb, and the example I'm going to show you is just some minor 7th chords, major 7th chords, kind of a similar example you might hear in something like Let Me Ride, where he's using the wah to kind of flutter some chords in the background. But a lot of the stuff like Chris Claremont and the other guitarists were doing was just a lot of comping and just vibey tones to set a mood that just kind of groove with the beat. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the bass. Electric bass is what I chose to use. This is a fretless Yamaha. The bass was just one of the things that defined the Chronic, you know. A lot of the bass was inspired by kind of like Bootsy Collins, just I would even say like James Jamerson, older bass players. You know, you had very groovy bass that walked around quite a bit. Colin Wolfe was just killing it on the bass. For the example that I'm going to show you right now is I plugged in to this old pedal called Korg Toneworks G5. Something I hadn't used in a while, but it had some incredible synth tones and stuff to it, kind of reminiscent of Bootsy and a little bit of like some of the stuff Colin was doing as well. Pretty much as far as how I chose to do a lot of the bass lines, just a lot of stuff where it's like kind of walking it around and just some little leads here and there. On the Sonics, I kind of departured a little bit from some of the things on the Chronic where I just did a little bit more leads and stuff like that as well, and just a little bit more movement. Almost like freestyling on the bass. But yeah, certain things like this, you know, this was kind of a riff inspired by like, you know, a Dre Day type of thing. So we're going to take a look at this ARP Odyssey here to recreate a lead synth tone. Dre used these all throughout the Chronic and all throughout his production throughout the years. The ARP Odyssey was kind of the competitor to the Mini Moog Model D back in the 70s. The Mini Moog Model D was what Dre used, which was what Parliament Funkadelic used, and just a classic, you know, 70s synth that just had quite a bit of flexibility. The ARP Odyssey works a little bit different. It doesn't have 3 oscillators, it has 2, but it has a lot of different features on it. We're looking at it right here, and with all the knobs down, we're getting no sound. I'm going to take oscillator 1 volume, turn it up you hear that I'm still just, it's not producing anything. So I am going to turn up the decay and the sustain. So here I got some sound now. To get that lead sound, I want to go up an octave. So now I got that high pitch octave range. I want a little bit of release on that, so I'm going to turn that up so the tone sustains after I release the note. So to get a little more color in there, I am going to turn up this ADSR section right here. So we're going to start hearing some more. There we go. A lot more sound coming. So if you listen to Nothing But a G Thing, you will hear a lot of the lead tones that Dre produced here. So I'm going to just give you an example of some of these. We use the glide to get those. I want to get some of that portamento action in there. Sounds on the ARP Odyssey to recreate that Mini Moog Model D G-Funk sound. Now, we want to go the opposite because we want to hear what the low end produced on the Mini Moog, those G-Funk bass tones. And we can do the same thing on the Odyssey. I'm going to show you some sounds I created that just kind of have that G-Funk swagger with the bass tone. Giving shout out to the Parliament Funkadelic sound for sure. So what we're gonna do to start this off right now, I got no sound. I'm gonna throw up both my oscillators, which I've tuned to each other. They're slightly detuned. I'm gonna get some decay going, a little bit of release. Now we need to drop this low. Cutoff filter is going to be a big element to kind of discover in the sweet spot for where this sound is. One of the things, at least. Right now, you can hear it's very bassy. Cool. Uh-oh. Okay. This is right here. You can kind of sweep that in and out too. I'm going to go a little more. I think that's a little too much though. If you take the resonance and keep going up, you're going to get more of this sweeping sound that's eventually going to start to sound like laser beams. You don't want to go too high with that. It's kind of a nice spot right there, so. So that's a nice little fat bass tone right there for kind of a G-Funk bass tone. Taking a look at the flexitone right here. I didn't know a damn thing about this instrument until I went searching to find this certain tone that you hear throughout a lot of Dre's production. Now, not just on the Chronic, this is something you can hear throughout his career on different beats and a lot of different productions of his. It's kind of like this wobbly sound. which he also created with a synthesizer as well, using an LFO, I believe. This instrument kind of works by pressing down. You're bending metal, which is actually bending the pitch of this metal as you bend it. And what it's doing, it's kind of like similar to when you bend a guitar tone, the string on a guitar. You're bending the pitch of the metal, and it's creating this wobbly sound. Now, this instrument goes back to, I think it was made in the 1940s, and it was actually really popular in a lot of horror movies and Hollywood films back in the day. It was used in a lot of sound design and different things like that. You'll hear it throughout different music, you know. If you just listen out for it, like now that I know what it is, it's been popping up in more and more songs that I've heard throughout the years. I wanted to recreate that sound to some degree on the synthesizer. So I went over to my Oberheim OB8, and what I used is a LFO to create this sound. So to do so, I'm just using one oscillator. You know, that's just a straight sine wave tone right there. And I'm just turning the modulation LFO up. Until I'm getting all that wobbliness there, and then I'm getting this sound. It's kind of like a controlled flexitone because the modulation is going at a pace that I'm controlling, whereas it's, you know, I haven't mastered this instrument at all, but you're getting kind of a similar thing going there. So you'll hear that throughout Dre's productions, these wobbly tones and stuff like that. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to episode 1 of The Sound Detective, doing a deep dive into Dr. Dre's The Chronic from '92, showing you how to recreate some of those tracks and the process that went into Dre's production. We're going to do a part 2 to this series, where we're going to do a deep dive into the mixing aspect of it. I'm going to show you what plugins I use, how I created some of the beats, some of the outboard gear I used, and the thought process that went behind that. Now, I want to give a special thanks to all the musicians who helped partake in this project. Couldn't have done it without them. You're going to see their link in the bio. If you could give me a comment, a like, and a subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon for future episodes. We got a lot more to come. Until next time, it's your one and only psychedelic sound detective, Detective 47.